Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for coming, everyone. This is Comics at the Crossroads. My name is Avery Kaplan. I wrote this book on intersectionality with my partner, and I'm a writer for comicsbeat.com, where I have a bi-weekly column on queerness in comics. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a queer trans woman, and we're just going to go down and do introductions for everyone.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. My name is Kayden Phoenix. I have a Latina superhero graphic novel called Jalisco, and my pronouns are she, her.
Hello, I'm William O. Tyler, he, him. I host a weekly talk show, I guess, on Twitch about movies and discussing movies and diversity and all that within them. But on the comics front, I also am a comic creator and just put out the Theater of Terror, Revenge of the Queers anthology, where I have 2 stories and also co-edited the book.
My name is Tara Madison Avery. I am the publisher of Stack Deck Press, also a cartoonist editor as well, and my pronouns are she, her, hers, or alternately your highness. Recent publications include Resistance, a coloring book / history book about queer resistance fighters in World War II, and the now Ignatz award-winning We're Still Here, which is the world's first all-trans comics anthology.
Hi, my name is Bernice Talley. My pronouns are she, her, and sometimes mistress. I'm an illustrator and a comic artist. My current projects include Monty Gomez's The Luchador and a comic in progress called Crackle.
Hi everyone, my name is Viktor Kearney. I am in the He series. I am a creator. I created a graphic novel called StrangeLore and working on the second book with an editor, which is really, really great because I never worked with an editor before, and I'm learning a lot from that. I'm also host of a podcast called Megashine, which is a podcast about geek, gay things from queer people of color perspective, and I'm an educator by day.
Excellent. Victor, let's start with you. What kind of challenges have you faced as a result of your identity in trying to get your comics out there, or have you?
Actually, I haven't. I think it's been a positive thing with my identity, just because there's a lot of queer people of color, especially Black queer people, who are looking for themselves in the fantasy, comic book, geek culture. And I think as I engage with many people who are creating and writing and just want to be full-out geeks, it's really been a positive experience, because you think about the things that you go through as a person of color, especially in a world where you don't really see yourself, but when you have other people that you're connecting with, it's really invigorating and powerful. So it's been positive so far.
Bernice, what about you?
Oh, I guess we're going down the line. Hey. I'll say it's a mixed bag, because I've been making comics off and on since 2002. It was when I was really young, I didn't even really know that people of color could be in comics, so I didn't even realize that it was necessary until my dad pointed out to me. He's like, look, if you don't see it in your books, then make them yourself. And I had the good fortune of making friends and colleagues who actually self-publish their own works, and they're just like, look, if a publisher won't take you seriously, you can do it yourself. So it was just kind of like taking odd jobs and scrumping and saving until I could make my own books. And then I got fortunate enough for folks that see my work and say, hey, are you for hire? And I do need money. I do draw other people's comic books. So it was one of those things where at the beginning, it was a lot of people saying, pass, no, I don't want to see, people don't want to see people of color in their comics. They want to see, the same old thing, so draw the same old thing, and I refused. But did it make it harder? Yeah, but at the same time, too, I'm happier that I made my own voice heard and not someone else's, but now I have the good fortune of also helping others who don't have a voice put their work out there, and yeah, it's nice. It's nice.
And Tara, how about you? Do you have any thoughts?
Well, I think I would agree with Viktor that including queer, including bi and trans content in my comics has actually done a lot more to gain audience rather than repel it, which when I first started making comics and publishing comics in the 90s, I was desperately afraid that, well, I don't want to be known as the queer cartoonist. What would that do to my career, And that may have been true at one point, I don't want to be known as the queer cartoonist. And so when I finally, maybe not, not too terribly long ago, 12, 13 years ago, started including explicit queer content in my comics, and I noticed my webcomics suddenly, boom, escalated in their clicks. And there's a certain truth in advertising aspect to it, and if people can't see you if you don't let them know who you are. And I think that including queer content helps you find your audience, and it also gives you confidence and authority in what you have to present. So overall, it's been pretty good for me, and considering how many literal decades I spent agonizing over whether I should include bi or trans content, the second I did, that proved to be an enormous waste of time. So.
Yeah, I have to agree with the panel thus far. Just recently, I've been kind of retrospective about my work and come to the realization that I made a very weird decision about my very first comic, which was centered around a heterosexual white couple. And I'm a gay black man. And so I found that that book, because there's so much of that already out there, that book really didn't sell well, and I still have lots of boxes of it. If anyone wants a copy of it, let me know. But as I started to do more work, I incorporated queerness and diversity and people of color more and more, and those things sell better just because I think the market is so saturated with one type of story that as much as we get the other stories out, people are hungry for them. So when they see them, they grab them. So the more content that I'm putting out that's more from myself and representative of myself seems to be better accepted.
I haven't had any conflicts. I'm much newer. I just got, my graphic novel comes in next week. I already have a coloring book of the same thing, of the Latina superhero. I am a queer creator. The content itself is not queer. It has to do mainly with the Latina. That's another aspect that I am also pursuing, of course, because I am both. So I haven't had anything. Actually, everything's been really positive. I've been really, really fortunate. In the future, I do have one of my 5 superheroes is queer, and we'll get to it when we get there, but that's in the years, so.
This is sort of related to a point that some of you brought up, but is there an example of representation that you can see yourself in pre-existing, or is it exclusively you feel like you need to create yourself, so to speak? Like, can you see yourself represented in any existing comics? Is there any role model or anything that you look up to, or is it?
Well, I'd like to point out there's been a lot more representation in recent years than there was previously, and when there's no representation, anything that you see is compelling. There was not a lot of trans representation in comics in the 70s and 80s when I was growing up. So when I saw these sort of devilish, trans and trans-adjacent figures in Howard Chaykin's comics, I couldn't get enough of it. They were reprehensible human beings, but ultimately fascinating, and it's just you knew there was something in there for you, and so until we arrived, so to speak, and we started influencing the public conversation about us by creating our own work, there was this long period of just being, gasping for media air, and jumping on anything that had any tangential relation to you.
Yeah, I come from I'm a writing and directing in regards to film, and so I can speak much more on that than comic books. But if you think of any great queer content, we had Philadelphia, we had Gia, we literally Girl Interrupted, right? Or no, not Girl Interrupted, but we always die, right? Brokeback Mountain, literally, if you die, you get an Academy Award, but it still backs the idea, basic instinct, right? The lesbian died, but the bi stayed alive. You know, it's one of those stereotypes that they push towards us, and that is what I've seen. So representation, yes. Is it still oppressive? Absolutely, right? They punish us, so to speak. That is what they're literally telling us. If you are queer, you die. Even on the OC, right? The lesbian died and the bi stayed alive. You know, like, that is what the things that they're trying to tell you. So I do write a queer content as well. I write everything. But that is something I'm trying to, like you were saying, if we don't have it, make it for yourself, right? Because we are the truthful I. That's literally it. Like, white guys, and no offense to white guys, like, you cannot write my story. I can't write everyone's story. You know, like, literally do it right, and they can't tell you otherwise, which is really nice. They can't bring you down and keep oppressing us if you tell the truth. So.
I will say that I will echo what everyone else saying about representation matters. I remember growing up. I grew up in the 80s, so therefore we didn't have anything, basically, when it came to black queer things, but we had a few, I'll take that back a little bit. We had a few things that I feel like till this day still triggers me in the sense of why I am creative today. For example, a movie, one of the best movies ever made, Xanadu, had a black muse in it. And at that moment as a kid, to see a black woman considered a goddess was like a big thing to me, because it kind of showed me that, oh, we can be gods, we can be all these great things. And there was this other movie, Fright Night 2. Maybe you probably didn't even seen it or haven't heard of it, but in that movie there was a queer black vampire named Belle. And Belle was androgynous. We didn't know what Belle really was, but Belle was a very androgynous character, and that right there really excited me about, like, oh my God, we can be androgynous on skates and a vampire and long hair. Like, that is just really neat to see. So just having those two images was something that just triggered me into seeing black people, black queer people, as gods, as vampires, as fairies, as all these great things. And I always think those particular images as something for me to see, to even want to do this type of stuff. I mean, besides Storm and Wonder Woman, but those two things have always been in the back of my mind when it comes to really seeing something of representation, but also really triggering me into actually getting into this stuff.
Kind of leading off of a point that was mentioned, does anyone else have any, like, bad representation that you can think of that you want to call out, or?
In regards to queer or everything?
Anything?
Anything. Latina or Latinos, right? We're narcos, so we are connected to drugs. We sell drugs. We're maids. We're cholos. We're cholas, right? I'm from Boyle Heights, so I get that left and right. Like, I don't even have tats. I don't barely have one earrings. I am not far from that. But it's literally, that is how I see us in the movies and the TV. Same thing. I can't speak very much on graphic novels or comics. I apologize, but that is something that I'm aware of. So when I write, I never write that, because that's not my world. I write my world. My world are people, right? Like, that is how I see us. That's how I've always seen us. For everything, not just Latinos, not just race.
I mean, I can speak on the things I used to hate seeing as a kid. Still kind of to now, but I've just kind of come to terms with, well, it is what it is, unfortunately, is that the Jezebel, or the hypersexuality of the black female body. Like, our bodies are constantly just kind of being, shoved in the face of the consumer as just like, she's gonna tear your ass up. Excuse me if there's any kids in this room. She is angry. She is loud. She's not intelligent. She's got 15 different babies, mamas. It's everything. I mean, violent. So there's, as far as like black women and black folks in general, there's just been, there's hundreds of years of stereotypes against us that just kind of really have, could wreck your reputation. And unfortunately, in this day and age, I still occasionally get profiled, and even at my own job sometimes, which is ridiculous, but I would say that's like the huge biggest negative stereotypes I can think of at the top of my head.
William, you said that your first story was about a white heterosexual couple. What made you want to see yourself more in your own writing? Was there a process to that, or was it?
I think that when I first got into comics, I was very much into like the mainstream stuff, so like DC, Marvel, and I think that when I started making comics, I wanted to emulate that. And the more that I was doing that, the less enjoyable it was. And so me adding more of myself into comics just came out of my own process of wanting to, one, have fun doing what I was doing, and two, express myself, because we, each have our own emotions and things we need to release, and art for me has always been, writing and art has always been that release for me. But it's hard to release if you're not actually like including yourself in your work. So it was a very organic process. I was just like, what I'm doing is not right. I need to be, doing what I enjoy and what works better for me personally.
I think you brought up an interesting point about the mainstream, and I'm curious if anyone thinks, is breaking into the mainstream a personal goal? Is it possible? Is it even desirable?
Well, it's possible. There are plenty of queer creators working in the mainstream right now. Depends on your goals as an artist. If you want to do superhero stories and you want a lot of people to read them, then probably, you want to work for Marvel or DC. If you want to do literally anything else, I have no understanding why except for just the money. Where an indie cartoonist will make a reputation, show some skill, show some talent, and then say, this is too hard, I need to pay my mortgage, and suddenly make a lot of bucks writing Batman for a few years. I mean, so that's what confuses me about the mainstream. I mean, we all grew up reading the superhero stuff. I still read a lot of the superhero stuff. I'm wearing a Green Lantern t-shirt. But it seems like a strange system. It seems like there's this huge box and everything in the box has to be pretty much like everything else. And then there's all these little things, these indie companies around this box, and this is the thing that gets all the attention, and all this stuff is about people's actual lives, and it gets ignored.
I'm absolutely for mainstream, and that is only because of the influence, right? If you have more eyes on you, you can influence more. Like little girls run up. I have a little Barbie doll with the big black dress, which is Jalisco, and they run up and they're so happy, right? Because it's Elena de Avalor, because it's not my real Barbie doll. But they literally can see themselves, and that's the whole point of it, whichever tangent we are of the oppressed people. It is something that is important. And I've learned as Jalisco got bigger and bigger, and I'm still very new, obviously, but it already has an impact, which is a very nice thing. It's a great compliment, not necessarily to me, but it's a great compliment in itself that you can change someone's mentality, right? You can give them the power, so.
It definitely was something I aspired to when I first got into comics. I really wanted to work in the mainstream, which is why I was emulating them. But the more that I created comics, the less I wanted to work in the mainstream, and the more that I just wanted to tell bizarre stories that I'm sure the mainstream would not want to carry right off the bat. So.
And I co-sign on that. At one point, I would have loved to write for Wonder Woman or even X-Men, because we all grew up loving those comics. But now I feel like that I don't want to be in the mainstream. I like doing my own stuff, telling my own stories, having that control over the content that I'm putting out, just because I feel like if I'm able to give you what I'm feeling and what makes me happy and everything that's just bright and dandy in that sense, I want that versus I have to do this and stay in this lane and do that and twist this way. I'd rather have my own freedom.
I'd have to speak on, I think I'm very indecisive. I like 50-50. I really, it's like, I love starting things from the grassroots and then somebody discovering it, and then it's like once it's discovered, someone says, hey, have you heard of this? No one's ever heard of this. Let's really boost it right now. It's like I'm still flabbergasted that Love and Rockets never became a television series, because it's so amazing. It's about these two beautiful Latina, queers growing up in the fiction. Basically, it's Oxnard. and it's still somewhere in like the gray area of like, it's a really popular comic book, but it's not mainstream.
Right.
So it's like, if it were to say Love and Rockets is a Hulu series now, people would say, whoa, what is Love and Rockets? They might pick up the books, and now all of a sudden the Hernandez brothers are a hit. And now it's like it's again, it's something that started as a seed and just blossomed into this amazing tree. So it's like, it could still have its indie roots, but still become something that's tactile and digestible for the mainstream public, and hopefully keep your integrity intact.
Another quick point is that traditional publishers are beginning to publish comics for other people who don't read superhero comics. Like we're getting, books, by like you might find at the Prism booth, like by Mariko Tamaki, this one summer, and that are aimed at, different kinds of readership than the superhero readership, and those are beginning to sell a lot better than the mainstream superhero books. And DC and Marvel are going to lose control of the comics world, because other venues and other kinds of publishing are beginning to overtake it in terms of sheer volume. And it's, the mainstream as we knew it 20, 30 years ago is probably not going to be around 20, 30 years from now.
And when I said mainstream, I didn't mean Marvel or DC will license my IP. I meant just audience. So like if it went to Hulu, it went to Netflix, right? Because you have your built-in audience. Like you think of The Walking Dead, Circle of Confusion, which is a management and now production company. They're the ones that actually started it, and they still run it. So it's same thing I tell you. I'm more on the film, the feature side. But that is what I mean. Like, I would have the control. You can license the IP in that regard, but then I can keep my characters authentic. I don't need to add a white actor, right? Because it takes place in Mexico. Everyone is Mexican. Like just little basic things like that I can control. And you can still get the audience if regardless, based on, authenticity. Oh, and Scholastic is amazing, by the way. Like Scholastic is, I saw them at San Diego Comic-Con. They have the #1 book, so Smile, which is a really great little graphic. No, I did read that one, so there are other, say indie, even though Scholastic is not indie, but in competition.
As creators, have you had any specific interactions with fans or any response that specifically stands out to you that makes you feel good about what you're doing? Or?
So really fast. So mine is Flocorico, right? So the dance. And so a lot of Flocorico teachers, they write me on Instagram or Facebook, mainly Instagram. And one of them said, instead of saying like first position, which is like put your hands out, hold the dress, she says superhero stance. And she said everybody lights up. And I was just like, wow, like I did not foresee that. That was not, anywhere in my mentality at all. But like even just that, whether or not they read the book, I don't know. But like that's a great, now they think they're superheroes. It's just one of those. So it's just happy, makes me happy.
Well, I think, we all, in particular, I go back to Kansas City. I grew up in the Kansas City area and moved to California only when I was, my 20s. And when, and we consider, we call it flyover country or whatever, and we on the coast tend to get a little complacent and feel that we sort of, decide what's cool and everybody else is kind of lost. And I guess it's just a numbers game. I don't know, but I would go back to Kansas City from time to time, and the kind of turnout for a panel like this, a queer panel, is amazing. I mean, we will fill this room, and they'll all come by and say thank you for coming, because they think they've been forgotten, and there isn't enough representation where they are. And I'm sure maybe a generation or two down the road that won't be the case anymore, where everybody will all be boring and everybody will be cool with us, and I don't know. But for now, it is a nice feeling when you go to Kansas City or some other place in the flyover country and you represent, and people thank you for showing up.
This just recently happened. So I'm from Union City, Tennessee, a very small town in West Tennessee. And I got a call from my high school. They wanted to showcase my book to the students, or the queer students there at my high school. And they wanted me to sign it and send it down to say, this person used to go to school here, la, la, la. And so that was really neat just to know that there were queer students able to be queer in Union City, Tennessee, in high school, and they heard about my book from online or something, and then it was just weird to, like, I'm signing this and sending it to my high school where I always felt like I was in prison, and there they are like excited just to have it within one of their art classes. And it's also funny because my old art teacher, who's a friend of mine on Facebook, was like, yeah, I actually had to go back and, I was there for something and I heard about this. So it was kind of neat to just have all that come back somewhat full circle, but now to have queer students in Tennessee, or in my small town in Tennessee, actually look at something that I created.
Bernice, you mentioned that you do a lot of work in mediums besides comics. Mm-hmm. Do you feel that comics help inform your work in other mediums, or do you think it's more separate?
I would say, well, you know what it is? I would like to say I do kind of like illustrative work, and what I like to do is I like to tag stories onto my illustrations. So, and it's kind of funny because it actually kind of comes from working with kids, because I teach art, and one of the things that I like to do is we like to sit and sketch and talk. And a lot of the kids that I work with, they're anywhere from like middle school, high school age, and we have conversations while we draw. So it's like when we're drawing, they're always just like, I don't feel like I'm being accepted. And it's like, well, what do you mean you don't feel like you're being accepted? It's just like, well, I feel like and then they start opening up to me about, their gender identity, and, because they're growing up in, they are growing up in South Central LA, and the community is a bit conservative when it comes to these things. No, I shouldn't say these things, I'm sorry. When it comes to this subject, so it's a bit sensitive to talk to them about it, but at the same time, too, I tell them about my experiences. I tell them just like, look, I know I'm probably not supposed to share this with you because, I don't know if there's a policy against this at work, but, I was like, actually, no, I'm going to tell you. I was like, I'm bi. So I was like, there's nothing wrong with you, being attracted to or falling in love with the same gender, or, the opposite gender, or both genders. I said, it's as natural as breathing. So it's like when I've actually drawn characters just as illustrations that are become full-flesh stories because of the conversations I've had with my kids. So I said to myself, since I was like, well, since I can't think of any bisexual Black comic book characters or illustrated characters in children's books, I was like, I'm probably going to do it myself so I can have something to talk to the kids about, so they feel, they look up to me. So it's like whenever we sit down and they're like, what's that you did? And I was like, well, that is my bootleg Batman, but her name is the Swallow, and her arch nemesis is the Fly. And then we kind of go into it, and it's like, it's really funny because it's like she's like a multimillionaire. She established her own natural hair business, and that's why she's so wealthy. And she's bi. She's in love with both a man and a woman, and it's super complicated, but it's also very sexy. And I do things like that, and they kind of laugh and they feel at ease, and it makes them feel like it's okay. So I know I went off the whole comics tangent, but it's like that's what my illustrative work kind of comes from too. It's not just from like, well, I'm going to draw this because this was really cool. I'm going to draw this because I feel like my students need this. So
Does anyone have an example of like a mentor who helped you either on your personal or creative journey? Does that affect you today or no?
Oh boy.
Not really. I've always been kind of self-taught, self-starter. So,
I'm a fan of the internet. I research a lot, but it's great. Like I need to research. So YouTube, I literally looked up the differences I told you between graphic novel, comic books. I researched how to write a comic book. I literally do not know, or did not know, or who to hire. But Google does everything. YouTube does as well. They'll literally break down everything for you and tell you why did this comic book suck. And it's just like great. Let me not do that. But same thing. It's the resources are there, so it's really, really nice. You just have to search for it.
you know, Joe Kubert did tell me that this single panel gag cartoon illustrating the concept of a nose fetish could be drawn better, and he gave me actual constructive criticism about my nose fetish cartoon. This was a long time ago. So that's the best mentor story I got.
I would say bad 80s horror movies and fantasy movies was like a mentor to me, because I feel like that at the time we had so many, all those types of movies, there was no pushback of what was out there, and you know, you go and rent these movies and watch them, but they just always had so much interesting content, and it's so out there, and I feel like we don't really have that anymore. We have so many franchises, but not really original stories, so I feel like those were kind of a mentor to me, like just to go out the box, and it's fun to go out the box. So.
Yeah.
I'd say my mentors actually I would say a tribe, not just one person, but the tribe would be like my indie comic creators that I've surrounded myself with for like the last 20 years. These are some of the most, creative, interesting folks you'll ever engage with. They're the ones that kind of pushed me to start self-publishing. They're the ones that are out there in Artist Alley right now. I've been kicking it with all day, sketching stuff and talking shop, and they keep continuing to empower me to just keep going. It's like one of the things that a good friend of mine, he's told me since day one, since we've met for the last 15 years, he's like, every chance you get, try to draw. Go to life drawing, because your drawing is, it's a muscle. I was like, if you don't use your muscles will atrophy. So I don't want my muscles to atrophy. Like, this is my drawing hand. I treat my drawing hand like it is Lady Godiva. So it's like lotion and flex and let's get to work. So I try to go to so it's like I listen to these words and I try to go to life drawing as often as I can, but I'm also reading books and watching documentaries and trying to find as many outlets as possible to keep being inspired. So it might not just be a person, it might just be an algorithm. YouTube.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough that as soon as I started making comics, I was introduced to Prism Comics, which is a huge resource for anyone queer to be able to get your work out there to an audience. So just meeting up with other creators through Prism and seeing what they're working on inspires me to want to keep working on my own stuff.
Be sure and visit us at Prism downstairs if you haven't already. Okay, I have another question for everyone. What personal goals do you have for the future of your comics?
I want to make features, so movies of each one of them, each one of my Latina superheroes, 5 of them, and then they come together in the 6th one, and it's out of a universe.
So the first comic that I did that I mentioned was about the heterosexual white couple. I'm actually rebooting and making it. There are already queer characters on the sidelines of that story, so I'm putting them more in the center and also bringing in a bunch of people of color. So I'm kind of rebooting that to have a more authentic feel to myself. And I'm doing it as a comic, but also experimenting with making my first animated short based off of it, which is really exciting. So other than that, I just want to do lots of more, I'm really into horror right now, so I want to do lots of more bizarre horror that kind of stem from social aspects, so some social horror.
Well, I'd like to, I have two personal comics projects that I write, draw, ink myself, and one of them is more sort of naturalistic. It's more slice of life. It's about bi, trans, poly, etc. folks in Southern California. Then I have another that's more of a politically explicit superhero story. And somebody asked me, like, if they take place in the same universe, which I'd never considered before, And then I thought, that's not a crazy idea, What if the events of one had some sort of consequences on the other? I would create my own dirthead universe, if you will, And I don't know, maybe if I can, scratch out enough pages to, I can have my first crossover with my own characters. But otherwise, I just wanted to continue to publish comics and to continue to get paid for it. That's kind of my whole goal. So
That's a good goal.
So I know I mentioned I'm working on Monty Gomez's The Luchador, but I'm really, really excited to launch my next story that's currently in progress called Crackle. And I'm super excited about it because she's literally a black gender fluid astronaut. So it's really exciting because she's literally she's fluid. She's super gender fluid. Like, she can literally transform into anyone, anything, and change her biology for planetary exploration. So it's really exciting to do that. So I want to actually launch that as a web series, and then because I love myself some French comics, I love bande dessinée. I really, 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 really want to make. I really want to make a bande dessinée style print. So that way, whether it's hard or soft cover, let's see how the budget goes. I want to start putting that out pretty soon, and if anybody will have me, I go under Nubian Ink. So yeah.
I just want to, finish off the series of StrangeLore. My goal is 3 books, and we're working on the second one, so that is a goal. But also the overall goal is for Black queer kids to see themselves in these type of stories. So if whatever I can put out there to help them see themselves and hopefully inspire them to do similar stuff, that's my biggest hope and goal.
What's a comic or any media, TV, anything that you've seen lately that you're really into?
I research a lot. So the DC Superheroes is on YouTube. They're 3 minutes. They're very, very for like middle schoolers. But it's for comps, so it's for comparables. It's literally, okay, this is what people are watching. Not necessarily my audience, but my audience is watching. And like they're all superheroes. They're all female superheroes, and it's super cool. None of them are Latina, and like there's 50 of them. So stuff like that, like we're still not represented, whether or not their sexuality or identity. I think they're all females, but like I don't know any of their sexualities. They passed the Bechdel test, so I guess it doesn't matter in that regard. But it's just that. It's to see where we are, and where we were years ago in regards to comics, in regards to literally anything. I tell you, mine's TV feature world. But like we have Wonder Woman, right, who competed, Captain Marvel. Now we have Batwoman on TV, right? So like same thing. I'm just seeing the progress, right? Because then you can see where we are, you can see where you want to go, and that's kind of how I research.
I'm gonna say Pose. I'm really obsessed with Pose right now, and just because, it's not the perfect show, but there is so much that is great about it, and we actually get to see trans Black and brown women authentically portraying trans Black and brown women. Like, they're actually acting, they're themselves. And I was so worried when that show was first announced that it was not gonna be cast correctly, but it was. They're all great.
Also the writer as well. There's a lot of writers, and not Ryan Murphy, but yeah, there's a lot of great people on it. He
Janet
backs.
Mock.
Yes, thank you. On and off the camera, Ryan Murphy is amazing.
Lady J.
I don't know, I read a lot of the same stuff I used to read, like Love and Rockets is my favorite comic book in the universe, 35 years going, so, and that, has, history of bi, trans, all sorts of queer representation. But I guess my current obsession is a totally not suitable for work webcomic. It's called Ogloff.
Oh,
You familiar with Ogloff? If any of you, yeah, okay, here we go.
sorry.
If any of you are D&D players or people who like grew up with Lord of the Rings or any other sort of this fantasy milieu, Ogloff is sort of a sexually explicit parody of classic fantasy tropes. And it comes in like 1 or 2 page, or I think they had like Cronar, Son of Man was like a 23-page novella of theirs. But and it just finds it delights in magic, sorcery, daring do, and the brute sexual logistics of people coupling. And it is queer. It's got like trans and bi and just every kind of LGBTQ, AIU, alpha, beta, gamma, rho content, and it's absolutely hilarious. And the most recent one was about flesh-eating zombies opening a restaurant because the preparation of human flesh isn't just for the undead anymore. So that's my current obsession. Ogloff, OGLAF.com. It's all free. You can you can binge read it and be done in a week or so, and you'll have lots of belly laughs.
Sorry. I just haven't heard that in a long time.
Yeah.
I love Ogloff. No, go ahead.
White Trees has been fun. It's only been 2 comics. I think it was just meant to be 2 comics, but it's been pretty good. It's the last one just came out like a week or 2 ago. The Magic Circle is another good book, which is about magic folks, but it was really neat how they put the story together, how it was drawn. And Black Magic was also a series that was done and has been in 2 graphic novels, but it's really good. It's really about witchcraft and what have you, and I love witchcraft and stuff, so those have been the current things I've been looking at right now.
You know what? I just picked this book up a couple of weeks ago, and I can't for the life of me remember the name of the artist, and I'm really mad. But I love this book because it reminds me of like 70s black cinema, not blaxploitation, but 70s black cinema, was Abbott.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I saw that book and I was just like, oh, what is this? It's like, oh,
Abbott is good.
yeah, Abbott was, oh my God. How do I summarize it? It's basically like Black Lois Lane in Detroit in the 70s. She's a badass. She takes care of everything she needs to take care of, and she can't hold down a man, but she's got like this gorge, because it's the 70s, so it's like bisexuality is still kind of taboo, like basically everything is taboo in the past, but she has like this gorgeous half Chinese, half black like woman that's just like on the sly, like, hey sugar, what's up? And she's like, no, stop it, you can't do that. It's like, but you love me. It's like, stop it. And it's like finally like it's just like, all right, come here girl, give me some sugar. But it's like I saw that and I loved it because it made me think of like, oh my God, it's this Friday Foster. It made me think of Friday Foster, and it's like because I grew up obsessed with Pam Grier, so it made me think of like Pam Grier, and even though my hair is stacked up right now, like I got the side shaved and everything, it's like with this off, I look like Abbott. So I was like, oh, she looks like me. Oh my God, it's amazing. I was like, she's my comic doppelganger. If I were a badass journalist from the 70s and a chain smoker. But it was awesome. I recommend you look up Abbott.
Okay, we've got a few minutes left, so does anyone have any questions that they want to ask? Open it up for Q&A, no?
So I'm curious how, the really difficult political environment in the last couple of years has affected all of your work. Like how have you responded to it artistically?
It's what drives me, honestly. When I was thinking of, when they were talking about mentors right now, and it's just like, I find things that get me mad, and that's why I write about them. Like, that's not a mentor, but it's a really reverse twist on it. Like, Jalisco has to do with the femicide, has to do with women of Juarez. So literally, that's been going on since the 80s and 90s. So, and it's something, like I was, I don't live there, but it's something that hurts me. And so I wrote about it, right? And I give them their victory, I give them their justice, because I can in a graphic novel. The next one I'm writing is Santa. It's in a border town. She's a Chicana hipster, and she goes up against ICE. Literally, like, same thing, because that is our political climate right now. And I'm Chicana, I'm American, but like literally, it still hurts me. So I'm writing about it. The next one is sex trafficking, because it is, everything I write is grounded. Literally, no one's helping us, you know? So at least I can save them, you know, or bring light to them as well. And I also donate net proceeds to organizations that are for those, you know, social issues.
I think that, you know, the advent of Rumpelstiltskin kind of put a lot of urgency behind a couple of projects that I had left on the back burner. We called the Trans Anthology We're Still Here because we wanted to let people know that just because there was a new sheriff in town and we were in danger of losing the Supreme Court, which we have, that we weren't going to go away. It also was the impetus for our book Resistance, which was up for Lammy. We do a series of coloring books, LGBTQ history coloring books featuring real people and including biographical details. We did one entirely devoted to resistance fighters in World War II who were queer from all over the world. And that was a not so subtle statement about, you know, what we need to do today, because, you know, we might have the house back, but it's not over. It motivates, but it's also, you know, you also imagine in your mind, what could I be writing about or doing if I didn't have to worry about this, you know? But you don't get to choose your million.
It's actually affected me in two different ways. The first would be I'm very fantasy-based. My art is very fantasy-based, and it used to be that my books would be based in completely other worlds, totally created worlds, and I found that my stories now are set in our world. There's still fantasy and horror within them, but it's very much more grounded into our world and commenting on the things that are happening in our world and how horrific or outrageous that stuff is. So that's one way that it's affected me. The other way is, as I said earlier, I also do a weekly film critic show on Twitch where we're just discussing movies, and I watch a lot of movies. I'm a huge movie guy, but I found that movies for me are an escape, and I was watching so many movies that the escape was becoming dangerous to escape from what's actually going on. So I kind of started to train myself to do something that I call conscious escapism, where I'm watching movies with everything that's happening in our world in mind and seeing how my escapism can be more responsible, where I can pick up ideas or inspiration from the things I'm, watching that will hopefully help in the real world. So those are the two ways that it's kind of affected me.
Bernice or Victor, do you have any thoughts that you want to add?
I would just say that this political climate right now is just motivating to me to make sure that we are throwing out as much representation as possible, but also really looking at the issue of power and how power is corruptive, but how it can be empowering, if that makes sense. So that's been kind of something that I've been looking at, especially when I'm creating stories, is looking at the power of corruption, but also looking at the way that you can be empowered from oppressive systems. So it's always been something that I've been passionate about since I was a kid, but in a lot of ways, just seeing it again as an older person is like, wow, okay, so there's so much you can just kind of tell within this, if that makes sense. So just using that as kind of fuel to keep going.
I mean, it's kind of funny because when you say this political climate, it's kind of interesting how it's like, how can I say this? My parents raised me woke before woke was woke. So it's one of those things where it always kind of influenced my work, and even my earliest work, I tried to be as vocal as possible about issues in the Black community. But now with everything, I'm trying to, I'm actually trying to be a lot more positive with my works, especially since, again, like I said, I work around a lot of children, a lot of teens, and one of the things that I try to do is, make them very socially aware of the world, but I also try to use the arts as a platform to not just inform, but to also give them comfort, that, things are hard now, but, just before there's I'm probably going to ruin this, sorry. There's always a dawn, so I want to give, my message is I want to give hope in my works, so they probably don't really, most of my stories don't really take place in our current present, but they take place in the possible future. So that way, even though things are really hard, we can still be optimistic. Let's try to be a little less pessimistic and a little bit more optimistic, but also realistic.
Does anyone else have anything you want to add? Or I think we're just about out of time, so maybe let's just start with Viktor and go back and maybe say the best way to find you online or social media if you want to.
You can find me on Twitter. Right now, my name is the Uncanny Gay Tupac, but Wonder Man 5, basically. And also Instagram, as his name is Viktor. And Megashine, which is my podcast, you can find it under Megashine.
Mine's, you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, and Tumblr. I barely use that, but sometimes. It's all Nubian_Inc_LA. So Nubian Inc. LA, that's me.
You can find me at stackdeckpress.com. You can also find me on Instagram and Patreon at TARAMAVERY. That's Tara M. Avery. I also have Stack Deck Press on Facebook and on Twitter at Stacked Deck PRSS, that final E missing.
I'm on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at William O. Tyler. Just about any social media will be at William O. Tyler for me. Patreon.com/William O. Tyler. I keep a blog there of news and exclusive sketches and art and stuff. And then the weekly show that I host, Cinephilia, is on twitch.tv/Perception Studio every Monday at 5:30 p.m.
My website is JaliscoSuperhero.com, and my Instagram is the same, Jalisco Superhero. And then I have a booth. I'm on 100B, on row B, so a couple down, but 100B, and I'll have my coloring books there. Thank you.
And you can find my writing on comicsbeat.com and on Twitter at Avery Kaplan 6. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. Thank you so much to our panelists for coming and sharing.